What experience made you grow up? Story 1. My dad struggled with alcoholism when I was a young boy. He would hide alcohol around the house and often lock himself in the bathroom for hours to avoid confrontation with my mom while secretly drinking. One day, while I was watching a movie with my dad and brother, my mom came in yelling because she had found more hidden alcohol. My dad was visibly intoxicated and, seemingly reaching his breaking point, jumped up and shoved her, knocking her to the floor. She got up, screamed, "I'm calling the police!" and ran toward the phone in the kitchen. He followed her, grabbing 2 knives from the counter while her back was turned. I must have been around 12 at the time, but seeing him grab the knives, I instinctively lunged at him, grabbing onto his leg to slow him down. This alerted my mom, and she bolted out the front door to the neighbor's house. My dad stopped at the door, and after a moment, I followed my mom to the neighbor's. A few minutes later, my little brother joined us. At the time, I didn't think this incident had a lasting effect on me, but looking back, I realized it triggered a significant change in my personality. Story 2. For those who wonder how experiences like this force you to grow up, they absolutely do. While the law may consider us adults at 18, most people are still developing emotionally and often rely on their family for support, even if it's just moral. When I was 19, my mom died of cancer. She had raised me on her own, and with no extended family, I'd largely raised myself while she worked tirelessly to pay the bills. I was attending college on a full scholarship halfway across the country, but her death shattered me. I lost the one person who loved me unconditionally, the one who listened to my complaints and supported me no matter what. Suddenly, I had no home to return to for Christmas and no one to witness my milestones like graduation or starting a family. I was consumed by fear of losing my scholarship and ending up homeless. On top of my grief, I had to arrange her funeral, deal with creditors, and navigate legal matters I wouldn't wish on anyone. It was overwhelming, and it forced me to mature in ways I could never have anticipated. Edit. Thank you for the gold and your kind responses. One of the hardest parts of this experience was the loneliness and the feeling of having no one to support me. Sharing my story and receiving your messages has truly brightened my day. Edit 2. For those curious, this happened 2 years ago. Since then, I've grown into a much stronger person. Every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself how heartbroken my mom would have been to see me fall apart. Now I'm about to graduate college debt-free with a promising job ahead. It's bittersweet, but I know she'd be proud. Story 3. Losing my job while supporting my wife and child was one of the toughest challenges I've ever faced. I was making about $34 an hour in my second year out of the Army, feeling on top of the world. My income allowed my wife to stay home with our infant child. But within 6 months, the company I worked for went under. My wife eventually found a job making $12 an hour while I stayed home with unemployment benefits, searching for work. It took 5 long months before I finally secured another job. In the end, we had to sell our house and move into a smaller, less appealing place. It was a tough adjustment, but 2 years later, we're finally back on our feet. My wife is back to staying home, and I've gained invaluable life lessons through the experience. Story 4. When I was 9, my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. By the time I was 12, I was taking care of her and my 2 younger brothers on my own. 3 days before my 19th birthday, she passed away. On my birthday, I had to confirm her body, a moment that forced me to confront the reality of my responsibilities. From that point on, I had to grow up quickly to ensure my brothers had a roof over their heads. Now at 23, I'm a certified nursing assistant working toward becoming a nurse. I'm also in a relationship with a woman who has 2 kids, and I love them like they're my own. My brothers are now old enough to take care of themselves and are living with a family member. I'm proud of the life I've built and the role I played in supporting my family. I want to take a moment to thank the generous person who gifted me gold. You're amazing, and your kindness means the world to me. I also appreciate everyone who has read and commented on my story. If you or someone you love is dealing with MS, I urge you to learn as much as possible about the condition and seek support from family and friends. My mom's struggle with MS was incredibly difficult, and not a day goes by that I don't think of her. While our relationship wasn't perfect, the time I spent with her was invaluable. She inspired me to pursue my passion for caregiving and my dream of becoming a nurse. Lastly, to clarify for those asking, I'm definitely a guy. Story 6. My fiance's murder was a defining moment in my life. It forced me to realize that life is fragile and that we must live fully in the present because tomorrow is never guaranteed. 16 years ago, I was an overweight IT professional whose life revolved around eating, reading, smoking, and watching TV. I was engaged to an incredible woman who was active, energetic, and full of zest for life. To be honest, I didn't treat her as well as I should have. In July 1999, she was tragically murdered, and my world fell apart. I sank into a deep depression and without trying lost a significant amount of weight. Then in November 2000, my father passed away unexpectedly. That was my lowest point. I came dangerously close to ending my own life, but a friend's unexpected visit gave me a chance to reflect. I realized I still had dreams and ambitions I hadn't pursued. I decided to honor my fiance's memory by living the life she would have wanted me to. I embraced the weight loss as a fresh start and began working toward my goals. Over the years, I have started karate, eventually earning a second Dan black belt, learned classical guitar, and even built my own guitar from scratch during a luthier course. Took photography lessons, culminating in a small but successful black and white photography exhibition. Returned to school, earning a master's degree and later a PhD, which led to a new career in academia. Learned conversational basics in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and German. Took up archery and bow hunting, gaining provincial recognition in 3D archery. I even began crafting my own longbows and knives, which I also gifted or sold. Developed a love for cooking, baking exceptional sourdough breads, pizzas, and making cured meats. Explored the world, experiencing incredible cultures and activities like diving in the Red Sea, dancing the tango in Buenos Aires, and attending an opera at the Sydney Opera House. Took ballroom dancing lessons with my wife, which has brought us closer than ever. Every skill or experience I've pursued has helped me live with purpose and appreciate life's fleeting beauty. My wife now knows how much I value her, and I make sure she feels cherished every day. Story 7. Getting divorced after just 2 years of marriage was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life. It forced me to reflect on why I got married in the first place, most of which were immature reasons, and to take responsibility for my mistakes. Now I have a much clearer idea of what I want in a partner, and I'm committed to putting in the effort to be the kind of partner someone else would want. Edit. Many people have asked about the immature reasons I mentioned, so here's some context. I did love my ex-husband in many ways, but our relationship was not one that should have led to marriage. We had significant personality differences and wanted different things out of life. I was seeking stability and was afraid that if I didn't get married then, I might never find someone. I thought what we had would be enough, even though I knew deep down I wanted to focus on my career, and we weren't aligned on that. Additionally, I had just finished treatment for an eating disorder and needed more time to grow as an individual. Instead, I rushed into something that felt stable. Since then, I've recovered and have grown to love the person I'm becoming. I don't regret the marriage or the divorce because both are integral parts of my journey. As I told my ex recently, I wish I'd had the strength to end the relationship before it became toxic. Through hard work, humility, and self-reflection, I've come to accept my choices, my role in the relationship's downfall, and how I can build a healthier and more fulfilling future. Story 8. A week into my freshman year of college, my dad called to tell me that my mom had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma. We later learned it was a rare, advanced, and aggressive form of the disease, which is already incurable. Less than 3 months later, she was gone. At the time of her death, her spine had broken in 4 places and collapsed. Her organs had failed, and she had bled into her brain. I spent the last 2 weeks of her life feeding her ice chips, watching her struggle to breathe, and forcing myself to smile whenever I was around her. I didn't cry in front of her, no matter how terrified I was. She was the first dead person I ever saw. I rushed to the hospital as soon as I could, but I was too late. When I walked into the ICU, she was lying so still under a quilt the nurses had made, her left eyelid slightly open, a sliver of blue staring lifelessly back at me. Her skin was cold, yellow, and covered in purple splotches around her neck. Losing her changed my life forever, but it didn't destroy me. Her battle with cancer taught me what it truly means to love someone. Her strength and optimism inspired me even in moments of weakness. I was terrified every single day she was sick, but her courage helped me discover bravery within myself. Story 9. When I was 13, my older brother Sam jumped off a 5-story building. We didn't know if he'd survive. Sam was 19 at the time, strong, intelligent, and incredibly talented. He was a piano virtuoso who could create magic with his fingers. But he also suffered from crippling anxiety, something I didn't fully understand at the time. I remember a moment from when I was 9. He ran out of the house crying and screaming without shoes. I thought it was funny then, not knowing what he was going through. Years later, when he jumped, it was devastating for my family. Everyone felt responsible in some way. My brother Jeff carried guilt. My mom believed she hadn't been a good enough parent. Even my dad, during a fight, placed blame on her because she and Sam often argued over silly things. The night Sam jumped, he called my mom to tell her he loved her. When he stopped answering, she panicked, grabbed the car keys, and drove around searching for him. She eventually dropped me off at a relative's house in the middle of the night. The next day, we saw Sam in the hospital, hooked up to tubes, fighting for his life. The doctors told us not to have hope. His neurologist was blunt. She said he'd be a vegetable forever, but Sam proved them wrong. Miraculously, he survived, even though part of his brain is dead. He walks, talks, and plays the piano again. He has a scar on his abdomen and throat, and his memory is spotty. He acts like a 6-year-old in a 22-year-old body, but he's alive, and we're so grateful. Our family grew closer through this tragedy. Sam's recovery hasn't been easy. Early on, he struggled with anger and once chased me with a chair over something as small as cereal. But he's come so far. He no longer has big fits of anger, and he's finding his way back, even if he might never fully get there. I think about the man who tried to stop Sam from jumping that night. I wish I could find him and tell him Sam is okay. I remember his soothing voice on the phone trying to coax my brother off the roof and his scream when Sam jumped. I hope he knows his efforts weren't in vain. Story 10. Being homeless changed my life in profound ways. My parents were neglectful and selfish, choosing to spend money on vacations and luxuries, like motorcycles, while my mentally handicapped brother and I were left to starve in a rundown shack infested with pests. The house had no heat, water, or electricity, and one part didn't even have walls. We lived with 6 neglected dogs, adding to the chaos. I constantly fought with my parents, begging them to prioritize feeding us instead of their lavish spending. One day, they blocked my car in the driveway, preventing me from getting to work, the only way I could afford food for my brother and me. They refused to move their car or let me move it. I ended up walking 3 miles to work, arriving late. And I remember feeling a terrifying sense of desperation when I told them later that if they didn't move the car, I would burn the house down. It scared me how much I meant it. The final breaking point came when the house became infested with fleas. I worked in food service, and fleas meant losing my job. I offered to kennel the dogs and let my brother sleep in the car if my parents would hire an exterminator. They refused, but went on a vacation to Las Vegas the next day. That was the last straw. I left while they were gone and never went back. For 9 months, I lived out of my car, surviving on a loaf of bread each week flavored with honey or Taco Bell sauce. I worked 2 jobs, 13 hours a day, just to keep myself warm and fed. Story 11. One of the most terrifying nights of my life involved my best friend being drugged and sexually assaulted. We were out drinking, and someone slipped something into her drink. Before I even realized something was wrong, a man had taken her away. It was November in Canada, and she didn't have her jacket, phone, or wallet. I spent the entire night searching for her with 2 other friends, one on foot and one driving. We looked until 4 a.m., drunk and desperate, but we couldn't find her. The next morning at 10 a.m., she called me from an unknown number. She sounded disoriented and in shock. Before I could figure out where she was, the man took the phone. When I asked him where her belongings were, he creepily responded, "What size is her bra?" My skin crawled. I managed to get her back on the phone and figured out the address. I sent a friend with a car to pick her up. When she returned, she collapsed in my arms, crying. It broke my heart to see her so devastated. That night changed me. I became more vigilant and less naive, realizing how many rotten people exist in the world. Story 12. I discovered that one of my younger brothers was molesting an even younger brother and our sister. It shattered my perception of life and family. Edit. For those asking if I hate him, it's complicated. Imagine losing someone you love in a car crash. At first, you're consumed by grief, knowing they're gone forever. You replay every moment, every argument, wondering if you could have done something differently. It's a mix of guilt, regret, and anguish. Now replace that grief with anger, raw, unrelenting fury. You want to direct it at the person responsible, but that person is someone you love, someone who has also shared precious memories with you. You remember the good moments, the times they made you laugh, shared their candy, or looked up to you for help. It's a paradoxical pain. You're enraged because they've hurt the people you love most, but you can't bring yourself to completely hate them because they're still part of your family. I carry that rage and sorrow every day, trying to reconcile the love I have for my brother with the unforgivable acts he committed. Story 13. I'm someone's little sister, and I was raped, not just once. I never told anyone because I didn't want to shatter their worlds the way mine was. But if I ever did tell them, I'd say this. Being raped isn't a death sentence. It doesn't mean I'm ruined. or that I'll be Suic forever, or that I'll never trust again. Yes, it was torture for a long time, but millions of people around the world have survived their own versions of soul torture, and I'm no different. I'll never be exactly the same, but that doesn't mean I'll always be worse. I'm strong, and I'm committed to working hard to be my best self. My dad wouldn't understand that, though. Knowing this happened to me would destroy him. But here's the thing. It happened to me. It's not who I am. It doesn't define me or my life, and I'm okay. If someone else out there is going through something similar, I want them to know they're not alone. You're not defined by what happened to you, and you're stronger than you think. Story 14. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 9 years old. It's the we don't know why, but the universe decided to screw you over kind, not the you might have done this to yourself kind. It started with 2 weeks of vomiting every single day. Then I just faded away. It felt like something out of a movie, darkness closing in, scattered flashes of memory. I remember my friend's paramedic dad, the drive to the ER, biting my tongue along the way. When I woke up, I was alone, cold and scared in a hospital room. My doctor was blunt. I'd need to stab myself in the fingers, abdomen, and legs several times a day for the rest of my life, or I'd die. He told me I could half-ass it, but then I'd go blind or lose my feet. 6 months later, life threw another curveball. My mom took us to Wisconsin for Christmas, and then she announced we weren't going back. At just 10 years old, I helped my dad pack a U-Haul in South Carolina, and we made a somber trip across the eastern states. Life comes at you fast, but I've learned to roll with the punches. Story 15. My mom was murdered. It happened nearly 4 years ago, and while my family and I have come a long way, the pain never fully goes away. My mom was an entrepreneur who owned an insurance brokerage and a candy store. Her work connected her deeply with the local Hispanic community. One day, she met a man who became obsessed with her, but she didn't feel the same way. His obsession grew until one day he showed up at her office demanding to talk. She stepped outside to confront him, tired of his harassment. He pulled a .22 pistol, shot her in the chest, and then shot himself in the head. I was 21 at the time, the oldest of 5 siblings. My siblings were 18, 16, 12, and 3. Their dad wasn't in the picture, so I had to step up. I took over my mom's insurance business, while other family members managed the candy store. I worked hard to provide for my siblings and hold our family together. Eventually, I realized my mom wouldn't have wanted me to give up my own dreams. I left the insurance business to pursue my passions. The past few years have been the hardest of my life, but they've also shaped me into someone I'm proud of. I've grown more than I ever thought possible. Story 16. When I was 11, I told my dad to go F*** himself because I wanted to keep playing Diddy Kong Racing on the N64. It wasn't my proudest moment. The house went dead silent, except for the sputtering sound of Tip-Tup the Turtle's stalled cart on the TV. All eyes were on my dad. He simply said, "Go to your room, now." I went to my room and sat on my bed, waiting for him to come in. I was certain I was about to get spanked, so I layered up in multiple pairs of soccer shorts for extra protection. About 15 minutes later, I saw shadows shifting under the door. This was it. But when my dad came in, he wasn't angry. He was crying. He sat on my bed and asked, "Why are you like this?" His voice broke as he talked about how much my behavior hurt him. He cried for about 5 minutes and then he left. I didn't know what to say at the time, but that moment changed me. I realized that my actions didn't just affect me, they hurt the people I cared about. I decided to change. Over time, I became a better person, and now I'm the favorite child and have power of attorney if anything happens to my parents. Story 17. My father has always been a deeply troubled man. When I was about 7 or 8, his entire family decided to cut him off completely. No more contact, no more financial help. This happened not long after my mom left him and filed for divorce. From what I've heard, my dad used to beat my half-brothers and my mom. I'm not sure if he ever hurt me. I think I may have blocked it out. Despite everything, my mom let him stay in my life. She had lost her first husband, my half-brother's dad, to murder and couldn't bear the thought of me growing up without a father. For some reason, my relationship with my dad was different. He never treated me the way he treated the rest of the family. Maybe it's because I was his little girl. I'll never know. As I grew up, I became the only one willing to be there for him. When I was 16, he became homeless, addicted to drugs, and started lying, cheating, and stealing. I knew what kind of person he was, but he was still my dad. I couldn't just abandon him. At 17, I moved out of my mom and stepdad's house and let my dad move in with me. I was working full-time and going to street school to make it all work. None of it benefited me. It was exhausting, and it cost me my youth and my hard-earned money. But I learned a lot. Those years taught me resilience, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of life. I'll never forget them. Story 18. I know exactly what you're talking about, as I've wrestled with these questions for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a religious household but never fully bought into it. When my parents separated, I left it all behind. In my world, the concept of a meaning to life doesn't really exist. It feels nonsensical to even ask the question. To me, life's meaning boils down to biology. All living things are here to replicate themselves. You could even argue the same for molecules. Sometimes I wish I could believe in a God, something greater than myself, something that would give my life undeniable meaning. But for me, there's nothing. So why am I here? I stay alive for several reasons. I want to learn as much as I can. I'm fortunate to be in a profession that allows me to do that. I'm here for my family who grapple with similar struggles, for my friends who seem to enjoy my company, and for the students I teach. Is that enough? As long as I don't get lost in the endless questioning, it is. There's love, there's happiness, and there's simply being myself and being with others. I don't claim to know your life experiences, but I've been through life-threatening situations and still ponder mortality regularly in my 30s. This isn't the life I envisioned growing up, but it's the one I have. Yet I'm here, you're here. Being good doesn't require a supernatural law. Being good is its own reward. From what you've shared, you seem to have a sense of decency, and that's all you need. Everything else is up to you. There are people who can relate to what you're going through. Maybe not many, but enough. Open up about your experiences because most of us are hurting in some profound way and can connect with that. Writing this might not be the same as having a beer with you, but there are people close to you who will do just that. Be a good person. Help others. Enjoy the company of those around you. We are made of stardust and will fade quickly. But right now, we have consciousness and a conscience. Story 19. When I was in 8th grade, our principal gave a speech a few days before our graduation. It stuck with me ever since. Here's a transcript to the best of my recollection. You are the class of 2000, the first graduates from this school in the new millennium. Some of you I've only known for a year. Others have been students here for your entire elementary and junior high school education. I can say, with maybe 4 or 5 exceptions, that you are the single most difficult, insufferable, delinquent group of students I have ever been forced to put up with. I'm going to use some adult language, because in a few short years, you will be adults. Nearly all of you are ups. And you need to hear that because it seems like no one has ever told you before. You can't improve if you go through life thinking you're perfect. Yes, your parents love you and think you're perfect. Your friends love you. Your brothers and sisters love you. But the world out there isn't going to reward you for being a loving son or a cool friend. Your mother will still love you if you wind up in jail, pumping gas for a living, or becoming a parent at 16. The world, however, will expect you to perform and will punish you when you fail. I'm not going to punish you, though, and I'll tell you why. A lot of you don't meet the requirements to graduate, whether academically or behaviorally. All of that is going to be corrected, on paper at least. Every one of you will walk across that stage and receive a diploma tomorrow. Not because you deserve it, not because I believe in you, but because I refuse to tolerate your presence in this school for another year. I've done everything I could for you, but I'm done being responsible for you, so there you have it. You're welcome. None of you have to repeat the 8th grade. Story 20. My son's mother started using drugs, which changed everything. I used to have him on weekends and during the summer, and while I knew something was wrong, I didn't know the full extent of it. My mom and her dad split the cost of his Catholic school tuition, but she started being late for everything: baseball practice, getting him to school, and even picking him up after school. The last time she forgot to pick him up, the school called her dad. He hated me at the time, but he ended up keeping my son. I didn't have any formal visitation set up because it had never been an issue before. For 2 months, I couldn't see my son. During that time, I got a court summons. Her sister was trying to get custody. It was clear my son's mom couldn't take care of him, so I decided it was time to step up. Her family disagreed, partly because she had convinced them I was an absent father. In reality, she was likely using that story to get money for drugs. When we went to court, the judge called her out, required her to take drug tests and classes, and made it clear she wasn't fit to have custody. Her family tried to paint me as irresponsible and a drug addict, but I offered to take a drug test on the spot. In the end, the judge granted me custody. I went from living like a bachelor with occasional parenting duties to being a full-time dad. For a year, I dealt with child protective services, random drug tests, mental health evaluations, and home visits. During that time, my son's mom lost her house, failed numerous drug tests, and went to prison for theft. She's out now, but hasn't changed. She has supervised visitation, but rarely shows up. It's heartbreaking to explain this to my son, but he's doing much better now. Her family has since come around, and I let them spend time with him whenever they want. I'm grateful for the help. My son is thriving. He's doing better in school and is spending the weekend in the Smoky Mountains with them. At one point, his mom had a chance to regain custody, but she didn't quit messing up. Having custody of my son has completely changed my outlook on life. I've learned to plan ahead and be the parent he deserves. Story 21. I got pregnant at 17. The father didn't stick around and owes over $10K in child support. Turns out he spent time in prison for possession of child porn, so in hindsight, we dodged a bullet. Luckily, I had amazing family support. I stayed at home, and my dad became my birth coach. He even got up in the middle of the night to feed my son. When my son was 2 months old, my parents looked after him while I attended night school. 3 months after my son was born, my dad's cancer returned. He passed away 3 years later. Those years were the hardest of my life. I grew up fast, balancing being a teenage mom and helping care for my dying dad who stayed at home until the end. My son is 19 now, and he's the best man I've ever known. At 19, legal drinking age in Canada, he spends his weekends looking after my disabled brother instead of going to the bar. He never complains. Sure, he's a bit of a slob, but he's kind, responsible, and amazing. He recently applied to join the Canadian Forces as a medic, and I'm so proud of him. I'll miss him terribly when he leaves, but I know my dad would have been even prouder. The only disappointment? My son isn't a hockey player. Teen moms don't have to become statistics. With support, it's possible to build a good life. Story 22. My husband struggled with PTSD and was self-medicating. He often took too much, which led to hallucinations. When he wouldn't stop, I decided to send our kids to his mom's house for the weekend and stage an intervention. Before I got back from dropping the kids off, he died. I found him in the car in our driveway. He had taken his regular medication along with the other stuff and passed out from heat stroke in the closed car on a hot summer day. I broke the back window to get to him, but it was too late. The next year was a whirlwind of grief, estate arrangements, life insurance, and raising our 2 kids alone. I moved us out of the city and started building a farm, teaching my kids responsibility and how to create something meaningful with their hands. It's been almost 2 years now. My kids help with the farm and our chickens, and we're preparing for our first crop planting. Life isn't just about hoping tomorrow will be better anymore. It's about making it better. Story 23. When I was 5, my father became completely disabled. The next year, one of my sisters was murdered. My mom passed away when I was 7. Another sister was killed when I was 9. From that point on, I took care of my dad mostly by myself. We lived in a rough, impoverished neighborhood where I was frequently jumped. I learned how to fight and avoid fights, carried no money, and always had a weapon. At some point, my dad started a relationship with an abusive alcoholic after his relationship with an abusive crack addict ended. She spent our money and made life more difficult. I managed our home, cooked, cleaned, and administered my dad's medications. I worked a job while attending school and graduated high school. At 17, I joined the military and reluctantly left my dad in her care. I served on combat missions overseas, and when I returned, my dad's health had deteriorated further. He passed away shortly after. I grew up fast, taking on responsibilities no child should face, but those experiences shaped me into who I am today. Story 24. I grew up on a remote island in Washington State, where most roads were unpaved, and kids often lived in homes built by their dads. When I was 9, we had a severe rat problem one summer. My dad set out traps, the kind that catch them alive in small cages. The first time he caught one, he handed me my Red Ryder BB gun and told me to kill it. I wanted to say, "Dad, this isn't right," but he and my brother were too excited to let me back out. I reluctantly went through with it. As I pumped round after round into the rat, it made horrific screaming noises that haunt me to this day. This was 18 years ago. My brother and dad laughed hysterically as I broke into tears once it died. Their laughter only grew louder at my reaction. That day, I realized the fragility of life, not just human life, but all life. I couldn't bear what I had done. I let that BB gun rust and never touched it again. I'm not anti-gun, but that experience forever changed how I see the weight of taking a life, and all of it over a rat. Story 25. At 19, I moved 2,500 miles away from my hometown on a whim. It was a combination of being fired from my job, escaping an abusive relationship, and my manic, drug-addled brain making impulsive decisions. I gave myself 2 weeks to prepare and left everything I couldn't carry on the plane. I abandoned thousands of dollars worth of video games I'd been collecting since childhood and irreplaceable family heirlooms from my late grandmother. It wasn't until months later, after my mental state began to stabilize, that I understood the gravity of what I had done and how alone I truly was. It was the best decision I could have made for myself, but I had no clue what I was doing at the time. I was severely mentally ill, years away from a PTSD diagnosis, and my life was hell for the next few years. Even now, life isn't perfect, but I've had an eventful journey and learned valuable lessons along the way. If I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Story 26. The Factory. I failed my first year of college so badly that I offered to drop out and work for a year to earn my own tuition for a second chance. My dad agreed to house and feed me, provided I kept a job and saved for school. That factory job was my first real taste of hard work. Conveyor belts, dangerous machinery, coworkers losing fingers, blood-stained shirts, oil-streaked hands. It was grueling. Weekends of mandatory overtime blurred into endless shifts filled with loud machinery and the constant struggle to make quota. Several months into the job, I went to a grocery store for the first time since starting. I picked up a bag of chips, paused, and noticed the price. $3.99. For the first time, I truly understood the value of $1. That bag of chips represented 20 minutes of my time at the factory, 20 minutes of sweat, noise, and bloodied hands. I put the chips back on the shelf. I've never looked at money the same way since. Story 27. When I was 18, I ran off to join the carnival on a whim. Over the next 18 months, I grew up in ways that were often painful. I worked in a concession stand, so I had it easier than those running the games or rides. Still, life was far from comfortable. We rarely had days off, constantly moving, setting up, or tearing down. I shared a trailer with 4 other girls, and we almost never had hot water. Fun and frustration went hand in hand every day. It was an intense, transformative experience that taught me resilience and adaptability. Story 27. When I was 18, I ran off and joined the carnival on a whim. In the 18 months I spent there, I grew up in ways I never anticipated. Some of it was painful, but all of it was transformative. I didn't work the rides or games, and there wasn't a freak show. Instead, I worked in a concession stand, which was relatively easy by carnival standards. Days off were rare. Most of the time, we were either driving, setting up, or tearing down. I shared a cramped trailer with 4 other girls, and we almost never had hot water. Fun and frustration went hand in hand daily. Carnivals are like small towns where everyone knows everyone, and very little stays private for long. Gossip spreads quickly, alliances form and dissolve, and the dating pool shrinks fast. But like small towns, the carnival community takes care of its own. People would feed you or give you the shirt off their back if you needed it. During those 18 months, I learned a lot about self-reliance and resilience. I worked 18-hour days for weeks on end. I learned to drive a semi and a forklift, navigate all kinds of roads in all kinds of weather while towing a golf cart trailer, and mastered map reading and CB radio lingo. I perfected laundry, packing, and cooking meals on a tiny propane stove. I figured out how to sweet-talk bouncers with an obviously fake ID, diffuse fights between my friends and locals, and hide my cash from sticky fingers. I also learned hard lessons. Don't mess with a 6'7". Mari, traveling shows are havens for illegal immigrants and wanted criminals, and life on the road teaches you to be truly self-sufficient. I don't recommend being a carny to everyone, but it was an experience I'll always be grateful for, and one I will never repeat. Story 28. In April 2013, I was 25 and dated a girl briefly. We were friends for months, slept together once, but the romantic part didn't last. We remained friends afterward. Around 7 months later, on the day I was moving to Chile for 6 months for my startup, she sent me a text with an ultrasound. At first, I didn't panic because I assumed she'd gotten pregnant recently. When I asked who the father was, she said it was her ex-boyfriend. I was confused. She would have been 7-8 months pregnant if that were true. She admitted she'd been hiding it, as she wasn't showing much due to her petite frame. I asked if she was sure I wasn't the father, and she assured me the doctors had calculated the conception date as 4 weeks before we were together. Relieved, I moved to Chile and carried on with my life. A couple of months later, her baby was born. I congratulated her from afar. On my next trip home, I reached out to meet the baby, but it didn't happen. Another 4 months passed, and on my next visit, we finally met at a Starbucks. She seemed pale and nervous. The baby, to my dismay, looked a lot like me, but I brushed it off. We chatted for half an hour. and as I returned from the restroom, she said, "There's something I need to tell you." I knew instantly. Her ex had taken a DNA test. It wasn't his child. I was the only other possibility. In that moment, my life changed forever. I went from a single carefree entrepreneur to the father of a 3-month-old girl. I smiled, told her I was happy, and offered my support. We discussed how to move forward. I explained that my startup was on the brink of success, but I'd leave it if she thought it best for us. We agreed it was better for me to continue working on my business and take things step by step. Over time, we started spending more time together. We talked every day, and I flew home often. Eventually, we decided to give our relationship a shot, both for ourselves and for our daughter. Fast forward a year. We've been together for 10 months, and I've moved in with them. My daughter is now 14 months old and already calls me Dad. I have no idea if I made the right decision, but I'm doing my best. Only time will tell. Story 30. I realized at a young age that I couldn't trust my mother at all. She wasn't just quirky or naive. She was dangerously irresponsible. For years, I tried to convince her to be a better parent, but it eventually hit me that she wasn't capable of change. She was never going to learn to cook. We lived on candy and TV dinners. Never going to manage her finances, and never going to take responsibility for her mistakes. Everything was always someone else's fault. My dad, her family, the landlord, even the phone company. At some point, I gave up on her and decided to take matters into my own hands. I started cooking for my younger brothers, even though it was nearly impossible. She was a hoarder, not to the point of animal carcasses, but close, and there was no space in the kitchen and no proper utensils. I used the small amount of money my grandpa left me to buy groceries for the family. For a long time, I believed things could have been worse if CPS had found out about us. Looking back now, I honestly can't see how that would have been the case. Story 31. When I was 14, I came home to find my 6-year-old sister sobbing on the front porch. Between sobs, she managed to tell me that Daddy doesn't love me anymore. She explained that he hadn't picked her up from the bus stop, so she had to walk home alone, and now he wouldn't wake up. My heart sank. I comforted her as best I could, told her to stay put, and went inside to check on him. My heart stopped when I saw my stepdad passed out on the couch with a bottle of pain pills and a knocked-over glass of vodka nearby. He had been battling addiction for years, so I knew he wasn't dead. But to a 6-year-old, it must have been terrifying. I was too angry to call an ambulance, so I called my mom instead. She told me to take my sister to the basement and keep her distracted until she got home. It was nearly impossible, as I had to keep running upstairs to check if he was still breathing. My mom got home about 45 minutes later. She couldn't wake him either, and finally called an ambulance. That was one of the last times I saw him. She kicked him out again, for the 5th time, and a few months later, he overdosed and died. At that point in my life, I'd already been through a lot, most of it related to my stepdad, but we had always managed to shield my little sister from the worst of it. That day changed everything. After my mom left with the ambulance, I had to explain things to my sister in the simplest terms, calm her down, and get her ready for bed. It was the moment I realized I had no choice but to grow up. There was no one else to handle the situation, so I had to step into the role of an adult. After that, I struggled to trust my mom. She had promised over and over that my stepdad had changed, that he had gotten help, and that we could trust him again. She was wrong every time. When she kicked him out for good, much of the responsibility for my sister fell on me. I got her ready for school in the morning, took her to the neighbors who got her to the bus stop, and picked her up after school. I helped her with her homework, made dinner, and handled bath time. Compared to what others have gone through, it might not seem like much, but for a high school freshman, it felt like I became a mother overnight. Story 32. I'll never forget the day the guy standing next to me died in a rocket and mortar attack. We were an armor company stationed on a hilltop. I was talking to a guy from the track next to ours, exchanged a quick goodbye, and walked over to the only tree on the hilltop. Seconds later, the first 122 rocket landed on the other side of the tree, knocking me down. I scrambled to my track with 4 other guys as waves of rockets and mortars pummeled the hill for over an hour. Inside the M113, we sat sweating, discussing what would happen if a rocket hit us directly. On the radio, the sergeant from the next track called for medics, pleading for help with an injured man who was bleeding out, likely from a kidney wound. Medics refused to leave the bunker until the assault stopped. The sergeant begged, then threatened, but the answer remained no. When the injured man died, the sergeant's words were heartbreaking, though I won't repeat them here. After about 30 minutes, my sergeant quietly said, "Hey, look at your leg." I looked down to see blood on my pants. Pulling them up, I found shrapnel wounds. Minor, but enough to get treated later. At the medic station, I learned the guy who died was the same man I had just been talking to. Walking past the tree saved my life. That night, we stayed on high alert, taking 2-hour shifts. The next morning, my hands shook so much I couldn't drink the coffee I'd made. My sergeant, on his second tour, sat with me and said, "Stay focused, be present, think only about here and now." Later that day, I built a small fire and burned everything I had from home, photos, letters, and memories of a life that suddenly felt irrelevant. At 21, with 10 months left to serve, my youth was gone. Story 33. Death has a way of forcing you to grow up. My sister passed away from ovarian cancer at 34. There was a 13-year age gap between us, and she was more than just my sister. She was my best friend and second mother. Growing up, we did everything together: movies, theme parks, you name it. When my parents couldn't afford something I needed, she bought it for me: clothes, school supplies, even my first bike with her first paycheck. She nurtured my love for video games and always put me first, even when she was sick. When she was in the hospital, she gave me gas money to visit her, knowing I could only afford the trip there, not back. She cared for me even in her hardest moments. I always feared losing her, and in the end, that fear became reality. Her death shattered my family. She was the glue holding us together, and without her, we drifted apart. She was funny, generous, and strong, and I miss her every single day. I am who I am because of her, and I'll never stop being grateful for the time we had together. Story 34. My ex-boyfriend snapped my dog's neck. He smeared her blood and feces across the walls in my bed, and when I walked into the apartment, he handed me her lifeless body by the head. He chased me out of the apartment, pushed me into the pool, and held my head underwater. When he finally let me up, he told me, "You're not allowed to love anything more than you love me." He controlled every part of my life. That moment broke me, but it also set me free. I got on a plane and left everything I knew behind. For months, I hid in my sister's apartment while she attended grad school. She forced me to confront my life and decide what I wanted to do. She wouldn't let me waste away in fear. I made a plan. I went back to school, took out loans, and worked tirelessly to rebuild my life on my terms. I refused to let anyone control me again. Now, people call me intimidating, and I'm okay with that. Every day I grow stronger, moving further away from the scared girl I used to be. I will never let anyone threaten my independence again, and I will never lose another innocent life because I was too afraid to walk away. Story 35. This story may get buried, but it's worth sharing. I was an RA in college for a year and a half, and to be honest, I wasn't very good at it. I hated confrontation, so I was a pushover. I avoided writing residents up whenever I could, and my floor quickly gained a reputation for being out of control. Many of the residents took stupid risks, and some ended up failing out or being kicked out of the dorms. I was supposed to help them transition into greater self-sufficiency, but I failed them in that role. During my last semester, I was walking back from a final when one of my residents ran up to me, saying there was a kid threatening to kill himself. I made sure the front office called campus security and went with him to find the kid. He wasn't one of my residents, but I knew him. He was high on mushrooms, pacing around a fifth-story room and threatening to jump. When I arrived, the other kids in the room left quickly, relieved that an authority figure was there. Left alone with the jumper, I tried to reason with him, but nothing worked. Then I tried to close the window he was fixated on climbing through. Before I could stop him, he dove past me through the window. I caught his leg just in time and held on for what felt like forever, but was likely just a second or two. Then his leg slipped out of my grip, and I watched him fall 50 feet toward the concrete below. As he fell, he looked up at me with a mixture of fear and confusion that I will never forget. I thought for sure he was going to die, and it would be my fault. I ran down to the courtyard expecting the worst. Instead, I found him standing, still disoriented, looking back up at the window he just jumped from. He had broken his pelvis in 12 places, but was so high that he could still walk around on it. The campus police and an ambulance arrived shortly after. I wrote up my report and made it about 10 feet before the gravity of what had happened and what could have happened hit me. I broke down completely. Of all the mistakes I'd made that year, this was by far the worst. Someone had nearly died because I failed. Later that afternoon, some friends came over to keep me company as I tried to process everything. They seemed unusually quiet, but I didn't understand why until another friend, unaware of the earlier incident, walked in and asked if I was upset about Billy. Billy was a friend from high school. We'd gone to a movie together the week before, and now I was being told he'd committed suicide the night before. It was completely unrelated to the jumper, but finding out like that on the same day was overwhelming. For months, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that look of confusion and fear on the jumper's face. I had trouble sleeping for a long time after. That year changed me. I started to take my responsibilities much more seriously, not just for myself, but for the role I play in the lives of others. Friends often say I act like a big brother now, and I think it stems from that experience. I didn't take care of the people I was supposed to back then, and I've been trying to do better ever since. Story 36. When I was 15, my dad got a job offer abroad. He sat us down and explained he had accepted the position and would be leaving soon. I was ecstatic. I imagined learning a new language and experiencing a new country. But then he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "You're not going." That was it. At just 16, I was left alone in an apartment with the rent paid up for a few months. I didn't even know this was something that could happen. Suddenly, I was entirely responsible for my own life, finding a place to live, managing school, and planning for a future I wasn't prepared for. A distant aunt helped me with some basic necessities and legalities, but otherwise I was on my own. At 16, I rented my first apartment. School, understandably, fell to the bottom of my priorities. I eventually managed to finish high school, but couldn't get my diploma without a legal guardian. I also began working to survive. For years, I operated in survival mode, and I still do. Even when things are stable, I'm constantly waiting for something bad to happen. Therapy helped me process the emotional damage, but the scars remain. My parents, particularly my dad, stripped me of a safe childhood, destroyed my youth, and robbed me of the future I could have had. Despite everything, I refuse to give up. Whatever I've achieved, I owe entirely to myself and my will to survive. I'm proud of the tough, resilient person I've become, but the pain and the betrayal are unforgettable and unforgivable. Story 37. When I was 9, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer that had spread to his brain. At the time, we lived on a remote Pacific island with limited medical resources. As his condition worsened, my mother frequently had to leave the island to find treatment for him, often for weeks at a time. There were only a handful of families on the island who could take my baby brother and me in, and when they couldn't, I was left to take care of him. By the time I was 10 or 11, I was cooking, cleaning, and getting him to school. In many ways, I became a father figure at an age when I was still a child myself. As my dad's cancer progressed, he became bedbound and childlike due to the effects of the cancer on his brain. When my mom traveled for treatment options, I cared for both him and my baby brother. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but I'm grateful for the experience. I learned resilience and responsibility far earlier than most. My brother, who has looked up to me his entire life, is now my closest friend. He even followed me thousands of miles from home and is a freshman at my university. Though the experience was hard, it made me who I am, and I wouldn't change it. Story 38. When I was 16, I moved in with my grandmother because her house was closer to the college I planned to attend. At first, it was a practical arrangement, but within months, everything changed. Her memory began to deteriorate. She forgot how to do basic tasks like cooking or managing her daily routine. Small frustrations turned into irritability, and soon she lost control of her bowels. My uncle hired a carer to come in twice a day, but much of the caregiving still fell to me. One particularly bad day, I called 111, the UK's non-emergency medical line, and they sent an ambulance hours later. The paramedics assessed her and decided to take her to the hospital. The next 3 weeks were a blur of hospital visits. At first, I visited every other day, but as her condition declined, I spent all day, every day by her side. She became increasingly confused, demanding things that didn't exist and berating the nurses. Eventually, she lost the ability to speak, then consciousness. She passed away shortly after. The experience changed me. I went from a typical teenager to someone who had to care for others and live independently. Watching someone I admired so deeply become so frail was devastating, but it also gave me a new perspective on life. Rest in peace, Grandma. Story 40. I watched my stepdad succumb to a serious drug addiction. He died of an overdose when I was 12 after vomiting in his sleep. I remember hearing a strange gurgling sound as I left for school that morning, not realizing what it meant. My mom found him on her lunch break. Before his death, his addiction was a constant presence in our lives. He would stumble around the house, singing nonsensical songs at the top of his lungs. I spent hours trying to get him to go to bed, often giving up when he'd finally collapse on the hallway floor. He even intentionally burned himself on the stove multiple times for drugs. At the time, I couldn't fully understand what was happening. Even now, part of me still doesn't. After he died, I lived with my mom's sister, stepsister, her homeless friend, and our dog for 2 more chaotic years. My mom dated a series of drug addicts and unstable people during that time. Thankfully, I had a solid support system at school and from extended family, which helped me survive those years. In high school, I threw myself into music. It became my escape, my outlet for the emotions I didn't know how to process. Today, I'm a music teacher. Music didn't just save me. It gave me a way to help others who might be going through similar struggles. I haven't talked about this in years, but if anyone out there is living with someone who is addicted, please take care of yourself. Find something you love and devote yourself to it. Don't let someone else's demons take over your life too. Story 41. I was sitting with my ex-girlfriend in her room. We had stayed friends, so it wasn't unusual for us to hang out. Then I received a text message that simply read, "You no longer have an enemy." I felt an intense wave of dread, the kind that sinks straight to your core. My heart felt like it had dropped to the bottom of the ocean. I knew instantly what it meant. It had to be her. My best friend in the entire world was gone. We fought constantly. She was as much an enemy to me as she was a friend, but I loved her with all my heart. She was the person I trusted the most, the first person I thought of when I was happy or lonely, and now she was gone. In one instant, she went from being the most important person in my life to being gone forever. I'd never get the chance to tell her how much she meant to me, how sorry I was for being an idiot, or how grateful I was to have her in my life. Every petty argument or missed text suddenly seemed so meaningless. It's been 3, going on 4 years now. I'm happy with my life, deeply happy, but she's still the first person I think of when I want to share something and don't know who to tell. Every day that passes feels heavier, like I'm growing further apart from her. That thought kills me. There's so much I'll never get to say to her, and that will always hurt. Story 42. People often talk about growing up, but for me, it's felt more like growing down, unraveling the complexity and plans I once believed defined maturity. I've always been an intellectual and somewhat of an existentialist, deeply driven by purpose. I was determined to secure a Navy officer scholarship while attending Texas AANDM, with dreams of becoming a Navy aviator and earning an engineering degree. My goal was to build a life of success and stability, complete with a 6-figure salary. Then my friend died in a motorcycle accident. He was a year older than me and had already been selected by the Navy. He was on track to accomplish everything he'd worked for. Just a week before his death, we went together to pick out an engagement ring for his girlfriend of 4 years. His future was unfolding beautifully. And then, in an instant, it was gone. His death forced me to reevaluate everything. I realized that all my plans and ambitions didn't truly mean anything. They were hollow compared to the value of the people in my life. So I quit Texas AANDM and moved into an apartment with my best friend. Now I spend more time with the people I care about, supporting my friends in their band, and living in the moment. I work a decent job not because I'm chasing a degree or a career, but because it sustains me. I'm still taking classes, but purely for the joy of learning, not to earn a diploma. I've come to understand that plans and money don't matter, people do. Story 43. My parents were codependent, and in turn, they raised a codependent child, me. My sister and I spent years caring for our 2 brothers, who have autism. I thought being mature meant growing up, but it didn't. I was mature because I had to be, not because I was truly in control of my life. My dad was also a compulsive gambler. At 15, I started working full-time to help support the family, only to discover that he was gambling away some of my paychecks. I became more mature, but still didn't grow up. When I was 18, he claimed to have stopped gambling. I wanted so badly to believe him. I let him use my credit to handle some business. In 1 year, he racked up 22 credit cards, a car loan, and destroyed my financial future. I moved away for college and thought I'd grown up, but I hadn't. I finished school and entered the workforce while maintaining a 6-year relationship with someone my dad disapproved of, simply because he didn't support me. The resentment built as I struggled with bad credit, and I turned to alcohol and drugs to cope. My dad continued to meddle in my life, even from hundreds of miles away. It all came to a head when I entered rehab. At a family night during rehab, my dad showed up and claimed he was the reason I went to rehab, the reason I finished college, even though he hadn't contributed financially and caused nothing but stress. When I tried to speak the truth, he stormed out. That was when it hit me. My dad truly believed his own delusions. He wasn't just manipulative, he was a sick man. I realized that while he caused many of my problems, they were still mine to deal with. I stayed clean, rebuilt my credit, and worked through my anger, depression, and anxiety. Today, I'm married to the same man I struggled with during my addiction. We've both been clean for years and will celebrate 10 years together this November. My credit is much better, and I've been off medication for over a year. The moment I truly became an adult was when I realized that my relationship with my dad could only exist with boundaries. He loves me, but he is toxic. He deserves my pity, not my anger. I keep our conversations generic and impersonal, and I've accepted that unless he addresses his own issues, which he likely never will, this is how it has to be. I still visit my family and talk to him, but I protect myself now. And that's what growing up really looks like. Story 44. The summer after my freshman year of college, I moved back home, thinking it would be a time to relax and reconnect with my family. Instead, everything unraveled. My dad, who had been unemployed for 3 years, left for a weekend claiming he had a job interview. When he didn't return on time and his phone was off, we started to worry. That's when we found his profiles on dating sites, porn sites, and emails to countless women. My mom left shortly after, unable to take the betrayal. When my dad finally returned, we learned he had lied about everything. He wasn't looking for a job, and he hadn't been paying the bills. The house was in foreclosure, and we had 2 weeks to move out. I spent those 2 weeks alone, cleaning out our 2-car garage, which was stuffed from floor to ceiling with 23 years of accumulated belongings. Meanwhile, my dad sat on the couch, glued to his computer, ignoring the chaos around him. As we dug deeper, the truth only got worse. He had left me with $4,000 of debt and a suspended license. My sister with at least $10,000 of debt, and my mom with even more. He'd been using fake identities, lying about his military background and going off his bipolar medication. I moved away and learned to fend for myself. My dad spiraled into alcoholism, remarried, and was jailed multiple times for domestic abuse. To this day, he's a compulsive liar. I don't talk to him much now. Every conversation feels like a step backward. I know I still have a lot of growing up to do, but staying away from him is one way I'm moving forward. Story 45. Growing up as the youngest of 4, I always lived in my brother's shadow. He was the oldest, the golden child, and I constantly struggled to prove my worth to my parents. At 16, my parents pushed me to get a job, calling me useless, until I finally landed a commission-based gig selling subscriptions for the Houston Chronicle. My boss drove us to various neighborhoods where we knocked on doors reciting a script. "Hi, my name is Mr. Boxley. I just moved 2 streets down, and I'm working to save for college by selling subscriptions." The reality was far darker. My boss wasn't just overseeing our work. He was using us as cover to deal drugs in the neighborhoods we canvassed. The other employees were mostly high school kids like me, or actual crackheads, 2 of whom smoked at work. It was surreal. Despite the chaos, I was proud when I finally earned $160 in commissions. I dreamed of buying things for myself and easing the financial burden on my parents. But the day after I got paid, my money was gone. At first, I had no idea who took it. Then 2 weeks later, I discovered the truth. My dad had stolen it to buy crack. Up until that moment, I had idolized my dad. I thought he was a successful lawyer and law professor. But that revelation shattered everything. I learned he couldn't hold a job, that his life was built on lies, and that I couldn't trust him or anyone else. It was a harsh lesson. The people you look up to can hurt you. Trust is fragile, and growing older doesn't automatically make someone a better person. From that experience, I learned to rely on myself. It was painful, but it was a turning point in understanding the world around me. Story 46. I had to grow up fast, but in hindsight, I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me about life. When I was 10, my father left after the divorce and took everything from us. My mother, a single parent, worked tirelessly to provide for us. But when I was 16, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. To help out, I juggled 2 jobs while attending school full-time. By the time I turned 18, my sister and I became homeless. My family was extremely conservative and Christian, but I knew from an early age that I didn't share their beliefs. I found a place for my sister to stay and worked 2 to 3 jobs to keep us afloat while trying to attend college. Unfortunately, my grades suffered, and I eventually had to leave school. I don't share my story for pity, but to encourage others. Despite these struggles, I found stability. I married a wonderful man, went back to school, and together we now own our own home. I'm deeply thankful for the life I have now and for learning to value it early on.